Hi, I'm Cece, and welcome back to the Nurse Cece, where I help nursing students and new grads go from overwhelmed to confident and hired. If Stanford is one of your dream programs, then this episode is so important because your resume is one of the first things they'll use to understand your story. If you want to apply to the Stanford New Grad RN residency, your resume cannot just be good enough. Because at Stanford, your resume is not just a list of jobs. It's proof of how you've prepared, what you've done, and why you're worth interviewing. And you're worth interviewing. So in this video, I'm breaking down exactly how to build a Stanford-ready resume as a new grad nurse. Stanford describes the resume as a summary of your experiences, abilities, strengths, skills, and accomplishments. In other words, your resume should help them quickly understand what you've done, what you bring, and how your background connects to the role. This is not the place to be vague, and it definitely is not the place to leave out important experience just because you think it doesn't count. Based on Stanford's guidance, your resume should include education. This should highlight your nursing program, your school, graduation, and your information. If you've had any leadership roles in school, the Stanford panelists actually suggested including that under your education section. This can include student nurse organizations, committee roles, mentorship roles, class leadership, and any projects you helped lead. Remember, leadership does not have to mean a huge title. It can also mean you initiated something, you were responsible for something, or you contributed to something. Another core section are internships or externships. If you've done a nursing intern or extern role, make sure to include the agency, supervisor, your role, time frame, and responsibilities. And if applicable, include military experience with your role, time frame, and responsibilities. Clinical orientations are very important. This is a big one. Stanford specifically says to list all clinical rotations, including the locations and the hours. That matters because clinical experience is a huge part of how they understand your preparation as a new grad nurse. Work experience. So this includes the employer, your job role, the time frame, and responsibilities. One of the most important things Stanford said in this webinar is this. Yes, you should include work experience even if it's not healthcare related. This is big for students who feel behind because you might be working in retail, food service, administration, or even customer service. But remember, all of these work experiences can still demonstrate your communication skills, your conflict resolution, critical thinking skills, time management, and teamwork. That means you do not need to have the perfect healthcare background to build a strong application. You just need to know how to position your experience. Stanford also said this. Yes, include your senior preceptorship experience even if it was not in adult medicine. That matters because your preceptorship still shows how you learned, how you performed in a clinical setting, and what kind of nurse you are becoming. Do not assume it only matters if it matches your final specialty exactly. It still counts. And volunteer experience. Stanford says to include volunteer experience from the past 10 years. And if you include it, remember to show the agency, the supervisor, your role, the number of hours volunteered, as well as your responsibilities. And there are also a few practical details that matter a lot. Stanford recommends submitting your required materials in one PDF. I repeat, one PDF, and also using one consistent name across your resume, transcripts, and application documents. This makes a difference if you go by nickname or by legal name, so just choose one. That sounds simple, but small inconsistencies can create confusion. And when you're applying to a competitive residency, details matter. You want your application to look organized, polished, intentional, and easy to review. A Stanford-Ready resume stands out because it is clear, complete, relevant, easy to scan, and aligned with your story, not because it's stuffed with fancy words. Remember, Stanford said they really read applications. So your goal is not to sound impressive for the sake of sounding impressive. Your goal is to make it easy for them to see your growth, your effort, and your potential. The biggest resume mistakes I would avoid are leaving out clinical hours, leaving out transferable work experience, making your resume too vague, that means not using action words, being inconsistent with your name across documents, forgetting that volunteer and leadership experience that can strengthen your story, and a word of advice. A weak resume is often not weak because the applicant lacked experience. It was weak because the experience was not presented clearly. So remember to present your experience clearly and have it with your story. In the next episode, I'm going to break down how to write a Stanford cover letter that actually helps you stand out without sounding generic, robotic, or overly perfect. And if you're serious about applying, subscribe and keep following this series because we're building your Stanford application piece by piece.